It does. A little. Yeah.
Yeah, can you? We're trying to adjust that,
Well, it should hold open. So if you don't-
no, not the focus, just the
Oh.
positioning on the screen, look a little angle.
That you right there. Never would have guessed.
Switch to the bed.
I think that's how we gotta do it.
So much different.
No way.
Is there a foot thing that raises and lowers it underneath it in the bottom? Which is what's going on here, right? There it is. You know what we start. I'm just behind.
I can't go, for God's sake. I look through those. Set up.
Yeah.
On.
Someone's on it.
Oh, it's Uncle Dave. Who's on there? Dave Barrymore. It's just called in on it. Okay, so you can see the street? Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Really good. I know Maida. How are you? That's up to you. Maida, are you gonna record this?
Some people will. It's phenomenal. Your voice is not. It's on. Oh, yeah. I know.
That's how it works. Good afternoon, welcome. Very special program this afternoon. Many of you know Boyce Bride, but you may not have known this about him, and so it's special. I'd like to thank in particular the Arts Association. We just came up with this idea on Sunday, and over the last 4 days, they've put this together. My sister Gail Gillespie, Tiffany Westwater has been rummaging randomly, manically through everything to get this set up technically. And so without their wonderful efforts, this would not be going forward right now. So I want to thank them and the Arts Association in general. I've seen all the different activities they have, but it's really been remarkable all season, July and August. Those who don't know, I'm Paul Sampson, and I'm doing some brief introductions here. Next person who's going to introduce Boyce is Julia Sessler, who has had a very special relationship with him over a number of years, and she's going to talk about that briefly and Boyce, and then we'll get to the program itself. Julia.
Thanks, Paul. So for those that don't know me, my name is Julia Sessler, and I have the privilege of getting to introduce Boyce tonight. We have what I think of as a classic intergenerational friendship, which is so common and unique at this special place. When Boyce called me earlier this week and asked me to introduce him today, I told him I would come up here and heckle him, to which he responded that it sounded perfect. What he doesn't know is that I'm going to first brag about all of his rowing accomplishments, because one thing about Boyce, he's a very humble Olympian. I first met Boyce on the ferry when I picked up rowing in high school. My dad, of course, knew who Boyce was and marched me over to Mr. Bud. Boyce, I don't even think said hello. The first things out of his mouth were, "Let me see your blisters." To which I gave him my hands, and he inspected the blisters on my hand and astutely said, "You row port."
Oh.
Later, when I was considering colleges, I learned that not only had Boyce, but also John Bent Sr. and Steve Flagg all rowed for Yale. In classic Boyce style, he just gave subtle jabs towards other universities to make sure I understood his alma mater. So I went off to Yale, and again, in classic Boyce style, he readily made an attempt to stay connected. He followed our team, emailed me encouraging notes, came to races. It was an invitation into the special fraternity and sorority of rowers. I love nothing more than introducing him to my team and hearing him regale us with his stories. So it is with this background that I'm here to introduce you to my friend, Boyce Bud, and did I mention a gold medalist in the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. So a little bit of background about Boyce. Boyce attended Yale, and after seeing a Sports Illustrated issue of the 1956 Yale varsity rowing team from the Olympics with gold medals, he decided he had to give this rowing thing a try. He had a successful career at Yale, setting records and winning many races. After graduating in
They've got Julia introducing Boyce.
decided that he was not ready to hang up his oar and went across the pond to Cambridge, where he made the prestigious boat, which is the varsity boat, racing and winning at Henley Royal Regatta in both the 8 and the pair, which is an incredibly difficult feat. One Boyce, if he has a plan, he's going to stick to that. Even if that means sneaking off behind Karen's back to meet his grandchildren for a 3 o'clock milkshake at the candy store. So after his stint in the UK, he decided to call up his college friend and pair partner, Emery Clark, to try a run at the Olympics. Turns out, Boyce was halfway decent. Boyce and his pair partner, Emery, landed in Philadelphia and rowed for Vesper with a ragtag group of men in a boat that had instant chemistry. Keep in mind, this was the 1960s. The Olympic boat usually just ended up being a collegiate varsity boat, whereas nowadays it's more of a Rolodex crew from various universities. At trials, which occurred at Orchard Beach, right next to Pelham, for those of you who are local, the Vesper boat was up against Harvard and University of California, Berkeley. Another thing about Boyce, he loves a bit of friendly competition. In fact, he would often ask me on the church deck on Sunday morning what my erg splits happened to be during that morning's workout. He would then go on to compare my distance and splits with Tom Phillips's morning workout. So when commentators referred to the Vesper boat in the 1964 Olympic trials as a, quote, crusty bunch of adults in a dilapidated old shell, it only added fuel to his fire. He even added a bit of trash talk. Rumor has it that the Harvard boys rode by in the new Pocock boat passing Vesper in their shell, and Bud could be heard saying, "She's tippy all right, but I swear she goes faster." And they went fast, beating both Harvard and Cal for the Olympic spot. After arriving in Tokyo, Boyce and his crew lost their first heat to Germany by, which in rowing terms is about 3 feet. Can you imagine what happens when you get this guy angry? Some of you don't have to imagine. Again, it just added fuel to the fire. In the final, the USA crossed the finish line first, a full 5 seconds ahead of the German team. One final anecdote I'll leave you with about Boyce. Once an oarsman, always an oarsman. During my time at Yale, there were 2 boats. One called the Boyce Bud and the other named Emery Clark for Boyce's pair partner. Boyce would periodically call me up just to check in and make sure that the Boyce Bud was always beating the Emery Bud. I knew that after he heard these words, he would immediately call Emery and tell him the good news. It is with great honor that I present you Boyce Bud.
You must all know that at Yale, we were trained to do public speaking. And it was emphasized that if you could embellish a story a little bit or a lot, that's much to be desired. So I'm tempted to make some corrections to what's going on, but I'll leave it. It's funny that Point of Woods played a major role in my experience. You see,
How?
come from Ocean Beach. And
Right.
No. Hey,
think about that for a second. So when my wife introduces me to this day, she said, "This is my husband, Boyce Budd. He comes from Point of Woods, from Ocean Beach, on the wrong side of the fence." I haven't heard that more than about 1,000 times in my life.
Why does he have to go into this?
I was a classmate of Stuart Dunn. Many of you here know Stuart. And he asked me one weekend, "Where are you
Oh,
going?"
you mean Boyce, poor guy.
I'm going to Far Island, to Ocean Beach. And I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to Far Island." Why don't you come down here, because there's going to be a dance at the casino." And so I did. And we went up to the tennis courts, and there was a blonde with two big tails beating her mother in the finals of the women's tennis championship. And as the say, I determined that she was a bit of all right. So at the dance that night, Stuart was nice enough to introduce me, but it was very, very clear that she had at least 6 or 7 serious interests in that room at the present time. So I was dismissed pretty quickly. But also at that dance, there was a guy, big, tall guy from the Yale 56 crew, which had just won the gold medal in Australia. And of course, I was starstruck. I was about to go to Yale, and I thought this sport called rowing would be fun to try. And here's this giant of a man. He's grown a lot in my imagination. I think he was about 6'11" when I met him. And he was one of these guys that, he wanted to pat me on the head. "You're all right. You're going to go to you should try rowing." So I did try it. And I have to correct Julia in this case. I tried it. I went out for crew at Yale, made the varsity in my sophomore year, then only rowed in the JV for my junior and my senior year. And when I finished that, I said, "To hell with this sport. I'm done. I've had enough." Good, nice sport, nice people, a lot of friends, but I then went to Cambridge.
Sherman too.
Correctly stated. And talk about serendipity, and this serendipity just works its way through this kind of an adventure that I'm talking about tonight. How this happened, I don't know, but I was sitting in a pub with a friend, having a beer one afternoon, and I just said to myself, I really need a workout. Now, after all those years of training at Yale, and then having this period where I wasn't doing anything physical, I said, I'm going to walk down to the boathouses on the River Cam, Cambridge Cam. I was in Trinity College, and Trinity had a beautiful boathouse.
Pull it back.
Can you imagine this in the modern day? Each college and a lot of universities having their own boathouses. That's how rowing is revered in Britain. So I walked down and I walked out on the dock, and there was a 4-width coxswain sitting at the edge of the water. And there was a big raw spot in the bow seat, and a long, tall, skinny Englishman in the 2 seat, and a big, hefty Australian in the 3 seat, no one in the stroke seat, and a French coxswain. And then the coach was standing there.
looked me over and he said, "Have you rowed before?" And I said, "Yes." And then I
Here.
started my apology, "Yes, but I was only."
Take it.
He said, just interrupted me, sent me into the building and said, "Get some kit," meaning short and shirt. "Get some kit and get out here and get in the stroke seat." And that single action caused me to fall in love with that sport again. You know, I had never stroked, I had never been in a before, and it was more damn fun. All of a sudden, rowing was fun. And by the way, we beat everybody. Beating everybody in sight, very, very satisfactory thing to do. So life went on. I made the Cambridge crew and we raced against Oxford. We beat them by 5 lengths, which is a serious spanking. And imagine the euphoria. So all of a sudden I had discovered something brand new about.
Put that back anywhere. As long as it's upright.
Fast forward, this guy that you've seen on the picture here, Henry Clark.
Commercial break.
Commercial break, yeah. No big deal, you'll see him in the winter. It's the ugly face right behind me. So he had left Yale, having had an awful career there. He was a captain of the Yale crew and they lost almost every race. And so he had this seething desire to set things straight, you know, to have another go, another try at it. It's one of those, it's a very weird sport, by the way. In case anybody ever tries to tell you otherwise, it is seriously weird. So he went into the Marine Corps. And then I will visit there's a letter that I wrote him. I was in the Marine Corps. He was in Subic Bay in the Philippines, and I was also in the Marine Corps. So we were both getting rid of that obligation. It was draft in those days for you youngins who don't have to go through that. You know what the draft is? So I wrote him this impassioned letter and said, we, wasn't any question of will you, it was, we are going to go out for the '64 Olympics. That's Clark right there. That's me. Check that face. I'm going to refer to him to some more later on. It's as bad as it looked. I just told Julia, the only thing I don't like this about this picture is that Clark's bicep looks a lot larger. And that's not the case, I can assure you. So we went to Vesper. Paul, you can push the next button. There's the letter. I'm not expecting you to read it, but it's so impassioned image. Oh. My wife's just perfect. Which happens a lot. So it's as impassioned a letter as I've ever written, and it was, you know, it was absolutely what we, the two of us, were going to do. Not a question of would you like to join me in this effort, baloney. This was straight on. We are going to go to Vesper Boat Club in Philadelphia, join them, and we're going to row in a pair with coxswain, which is the slowest, ugliest event in the Olympics. But I thought for two large, slow, and ugly oarsmen, that would be the right boat. We had no notion of the 8-oar boat at all. Could I have the next one? This is Boathouse Row in Philadelphia. These beautiful boathouses were built around the time of the Civil War. As little shacks.
One here too.
Under them, and then they would beautify them. And this one, by the way, is a magnificent piece by one of Philadelphia's most famous architects. And here's Vesper. You can just about see the letters there. So we joined Vesper Boat Club and very quickly found out that their idea of how to row was more like Marine combat. It wasn't about going out and having a nice little race with your friends, saying to the University of Pennsylvania boys, well, road boys. It was none of that. It was just plain win. Vesper wanted to win. And I'm sure some of you know the Kelly family. How could you not? Grace Kelly was the brother of Jack Kelly, who was the head of this boat club.
Sister, Jack Kelly.
All of us were ever hopeful that Grace would come down to the boathouse and say hello. That didn't happen, but she was very the favorite of her brother Jack, and he was a very, very successful oarsman, as was his father. And they kind of imbued this club with this ferocious, every race counted. You know, if we were in a regatta, and you were a 16-year-old kid and you were in a 4-oared boat, you're going out there to kick their heinies. And heiny was not the word that was used. And this was just the kind of an environment that Clark and I wanted to train in. And the club was filled with these guys of all ages. And we slapped together the Olympic 8 from these people. After a year of training, by the way, we landed here on about September 1st, and the Olympics was about September 1st, a year later. Okay, Paul. Do one more. Thanks. This is our little coxswain. I mean, our little coach, Al Rosenberg. And this is a photograph that just absolutely defines him.
Bad coverage here.
He was a lawyer, a pharmacist, an ex-coxswain, a smartass, and one of the smartest guys in the sport of rowing. And he loved nothing more than disrupting the whole sport, of taking a different approach to whatever it was we were doing. Here he's standing in a boat tent. You see all the boats and you see the oars. And he's contemplating the future. You know, at this point, this is at Henley. At this point, we had the whole season to go, so we were really just getting going. Okay, Paul. All right, here it is. You knew you'd have to go through this. So these two guys here went to LaSalle University, a Catholic school college, and now a university, I think, in Philadelphia. That's Emery Clark. By the way, except with biceps. That's me. These two guys are the Amlong brothers, Joe and Tom Amlong. And they sounded, when they talked, a whole lot like they came from West Virginia. So it's Tom and Joe, Tom and Joe. And then we had a 36-year-old businessman.
Those are the two that do my voice.
Previous Olympics in the single scull, double scull. Here we have a Cornell grad who had been temporarily thrown out of Cornell because his fraternity borrowed a creche from a church, a Christmas creche to put in their fraternity. So he was given a year off at Cornell. Hell of an oarsman. And then look at these two guys. This is our coxswain, a 47-year-old Hungarian, and we could not conceive of somebody that aged participating in a sport. 47 years old. Now he's just a coxswain, and more on that subject later, because you'll notice that oarsmen love to make comments about the little bastards that sit in stern of the boat and do nothing. Well, they do some stuff. And then here's our coach, Al Rosenberg. That's the Philadelphia Art Museum is right back. That might be it right there. This is out on the dock at Vesper Boat Club. Beautiful setting. And for once, were dressed half decently, just half decently, but half decently. Okay, Paul? Here we are pulling away from the boat dock. And it certainly is a beautiful scene, or at least it is to me. These big, long 65-foot, is that right? 65 feet? 65-foot boats. There's a slide. We're sitting on a seat that rolls back on and forth on rollers. And we're about to pull away from this dock. Okay, Paul. I think there's another one here. The same sort of thing. Now, I'd like to point out something. This is called the puddle. The puddle? That's me. Please notice who has the largest puddle.
Largest what?
Arguably, he might. But he just had luck on
Put it
that.
on your good ear. I've read his book.
Well, now here we are at the head of the Long Island Sound, Julia's favorite rowing spot, called Orchard Beach in Pelham Bay.
Pelham Bay.
This is where the Olympic trials took place. So the deal was to want to make the Olympic
Can
team,
you hear it?
you had to win trials, the trials regatta. So all the 8-oared boats in the country that were considered themselves fast came here. So back here we are racing. I'll talk about that in a second. Back here is the New York Yacht Club boat dock. And all the crews that were competing were on there. The University of California, every one of them 6'4" or 5", all tan, all blonde, all orderly with University of California sweatshirts on. Harvard, ever arrogant, standing over here on the dock. Are there any boards in here? Any Harvard people? How nice.
Oh, nice.
Do I see one at the door? Oh. Hey. It's a loaded there. So they were all standing there. They'd all worked out, and this was the day before the trials began. And we arrived. Now, Vesper was not a thing of beauty. The clothing we wore was old Marine Corps shirts, basketball shirts, rowing shirts from, remember there was one from Finland, and all sorts of, we were déshabillés, is that how you say it? You know, we were a mess. So we brought our boat out on the dock, and as we always did, put it up on the stand to start rigging it. And that meant that we were going to argue for at least 15 or 20 minutes about everything and anything, with the coaches, with each other. Tom Anlong put a chaw of tobacco in his mouth. More on that later. And so this went as we prepared the boat for this most important race. You either win this thing or your Olympic dreams are dead. So we finally put the water in. Tom Anlong released a chaw. And this was a horror to the old blue blazer types that ran the sport of rowing. Who would ever use chewing tobacco if they were going out for a practice row? So we went out there, and you know, the coxswain would say, "Ready, all, row." And in our boat, about 3 people would row. The rest were still adjusting their socks, talking to each other. There'd be 1 or 2 arguments still going on. And we would slowly, one by one, kick in and paddle the boat out to the bay. Now, of course, after we were out there, we would get deadly serious. It wasn't all fun and games, but in fact, there was nothing fun and games about that sort of stuff. But it went on all the time. So why not, as as you're getting ready to row the race of your life. So here we are in the finals, and I'm delighted to be able to say that's Vesper. I know you can read, but I'm gonna make sure you know what you're looking at. Here's Yale back here. Here's Harvard way back here, and there's California. Now the picture is a little skewed, so it's not quite as bad as it looks, but we beat Harvard by 2 1/4 lengths. And I want to let you savor this, much as I savor it. And I want you to know it makes the hair stand up in the back of my neck to this day, right now. Right now. So we did the racing start, 2,000 meters now, 1 1/4 miles. We did a racing start, and we pulled out in first position, and we basically crept up on, not crept up on Harvard, we gradually moved on them, rowing at about 35, 36 strokes a minute, just cruising along. And we got down toward the end. Now, normally in a crew race, you start your sprint with about 500 meters, 1/4 of the race course to go. We never started this sprint. We just kept on right at 35. This is the part I love. And just cruised across the finish line, way out in front of the bars. We never stopped paddling. We just took the stroke down to a paddle, went down to the end of the course, turned, and started to paddle back. So we basically never stopped rowing. And here's Harvard lying here in their boats, exhausted. Here's Yale, and here's the University of California. They're all slumped over like this. And this one wise guy at our boat said, "Well rowed, Harvard." Yeah. Isn't it amazing how juvenile? But me, I'm 84 and I'm still juvenile. But anyway, we won the heat, or not heat. This is the final. We won the final, and so we've made the Olympic team. Exaltation. And then about 10 minutes later, wait a minute, we still have the Olympics to go, and the fastest crew in the world are the West Germans, Ratzeburg, club called Ratzeburg. And so the euphoria kind of came and then went, and now you've got the whole summer to train in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a lovely environment in the middle of summer. Humidity is about 96%. And you come in from a workout and you're 6 pounds less than you were when you started.
6 pounds less.
All summer long. Finally, we went to Tokyo. So here we are. This is just rowing back from, remember I said we were paddling along on the way back. We never stopped, by the way, until we were halfway down the course, just to rub it in, because the crowd was filled with bards, and this was their moment. They were judged to be the fastest crew in the country. And Sports Illustrated had an article, I forgot to mention that. Sports Illustrated had an issue with a picture of the Harvard crew on the front, fastest crew in the US, sure bet for the Olympics. Well, for Olympic gold. Our coach bought about 30 copies, and they were all over the boathouse. Like everywhere we turned, above the urinals. So, what I should mention the fact that when we were lining up for this, the race you just saw on the previous screen, when we were lining up, turning a 65-foot boat is a very laborious thing, and it takes a good coxswain to do it. That's one of the few nice things I'll say about coxswains. But our coxswain was maneuvering us around like this, and sure enough, we were beside Harvard. So we brought the boat over onto the starting docks, and the same Tom Amlong turned to the Harvard crew and said, You boys bring along your copies of Sports Illustrated. You know, I was so nervous that I couldn't even speak, much less say something smart like that. But that's what he said to them, and oh, God. To this day. Okay, so we're paddling back to the boathouse, having just won. Paul?
That's from Sports Illustrated, what was on the screen.
Oh, yes. Notice the title. I love the title. Anything boys can do, men can do better. We averaged about 24, 25 years of age, you know, and we were rowing against college pros. And so it was one of those times when, those few times when old men could ride. Now, this is what we do to coxswains. You have to remember, those little bastards do nothing but yell at us and give us commands and criticize us when our blade work isn't clean. They say the most awful stuff to us. And so when we win a race, this is how we get back at it. And the objective is altitude and amplitude. And that was about his 5th time being tossed into the drink that day.
So we can't see who's on here.
After the 8 oar races were over, Rosenberg did a very unusual thing, had us go back into the small boats. So this is what they call a pair with coxswain. Coxswain's up forward like that. And you can see from the expression and the sweat and everything else that this has been a more than stressful day. I've got to tell you that at about the 500-meter mark to go, with 500 meters left to go down the race course, I was seeing orange. The trees were orange, the grass was orange, the water was orange, the other boats were orange. Yeah, that's why I am the way I am. Okay.
Are we gonna take the umbrella with us?
I don't need to. It's
Another
only
ugly shot of our.
Yeah, excuse me.
This is how we were typically dressed. That's a Finnish racing shirt there. That's a and so forth. Okay. People. Now, Lyndon Johnson was our president. And Lyndon insisted that we wear cowboy hats. The whole US team. Gymnasts, oarsmen. You see how much I like it. But that was our Olympic uniform. Pretty cool in a big formation coming into the stadium. Okay, Paul. Now, this has nothing to do with rowing, but that guy is Joe Frazier, who many of you will know from fighting against Ali. Well, he was on the Olympic team, and he became a very good friend of ours because he lived on the same floor with the rowers. There was this funny all-black boxers down at this end of the hall, and all these Ivy League types oarsmen, tall, white. I don't think there were any black oarsmen at all on our side, but we became best of friends with the boxers. Joe was from Philadelphia.
Joe Frazier.
Just the nicest guy you could ever imagine. And here he is lifting this Soviet heavyweight off the ground with Joe's left hook. And that's how he finished off and won a gold medal. And he had a broken thumb. So he fought the finals one-handed. Think about that. At least I think about it. Paul? So here we are at the Olympic Stadium. And you can't imagine the feeling of being part of this. So there's every team in the Olympics who marched in previously like this. That might even be us down there in the blue. This is the Japanese team here. And one important thing that they did was they released boxes of doves. And you know what doves do when they well, one dove did on our toxin.